So welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. My name's John Baker, and I hope we can meet each other, everybody, after this talk. We're going to have a little talk and discussion. We have been working our way through a book, or just starting, it's so big, called The Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. And these are teachings of a particular Tibetan teacher named Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Rinpoche is the title, his title. There are many Rinpoches among the Tibetans. Means precious jewel. It's kind of like the Tibetan Buddhist equivalent of the Catholic Monsignor. And he came to this country in 1970 and died in 1987. And in those years, every year except for one or two, he took his students away, a group of them, a very different group each year, a lot of new people, maybe about 100 or 150 students for 3 months. And they had what was called seminary. That's what we titled it. And what it was a period, there were alternate periods of study, and during the study periods we'd have classes and we'd be sitting in between the classes, and then we'd have periods when they were just sitting, sort of like a silent retreat. And they were held, these seminaries, in various places. The first one was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, because we had some of them in ski resorts during the off-season. They were cheap. We could rent the facilities there. And we had it in the fall in Jackson Hole, the very first seminary. And then the second one was in Snowmass, again, the same kind of thing, in a ski resort. And then we had one up in Chateau Lake Louise in Banff. Another one was held in, where was it in Pennsylvania?
Bedford.
Huh?
Bedford.
Bedford? Bedford, Pennsylvania.
Bedford Springs Hotel.
Bedford Springs Hotel, that's it. And they I think might have been one or two other locations. And these seminaries were divided into roughly two parts. The first part were in Tibetan Buddhism, the path is organized into 9 divisions. And then they're subdivided, those 9, into 3. And the first 2 are so-called the Hinayana and the Mahayana, and the third is Vajrayana, which is also called Tantrayana or Mantrayana. And when people talk about Tantra, they're talking about the Vajrayana. The Hinayana and Mahayana teachings that were given at these seminaries were available to people on the path from get-go. But the Vajrayana teachings were held secret, and they were only available to people who had gone to one of these seminaries. Then you could buy transcripts of them. But before Trungpa Rinpoche died, he made provisions that at some point in the future, all the teachings would be made public. And that has happened. And that's what the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma is. It's a digest in 3 large volumes of all the talks that he gave. And there were other classes, too, run by his students, his closer students. But those talks that he gave were digested into these 3 volumes, and the third volume is all Vajrayana, Tantra. So I just started with the first volume because it's really wonderful teachings. And we're working our way through it, and we're up to chapter 5. Last week, is it chapter 5? No, chapter 4. Opening to the True Dharma, it's called, that chapter. And last week, Carrie Tamura, CT, talked about the first part of that chapter, the meaning of the word Dharma, and Sadharma. Sadharma is an abbreviation of Satya Dharma. In Sanskrit, Satya means the true Dharma. And he talked about that. And tonight I'm going to do the next part of that chapter, maybe all the rest of it. elaborating on what constitutes the true Dharma, the Saddharma. The definition of Saddharma is that which tames the mind. And by that, what they're talking about is it tames the so-called defilements, kleshas in Sanskrit. The defilements are the emotions, the defiling emotions, like passion, lust, greed, envy, jealousy, hatred, pride, and so forth. And these emotions are sort of the fully developed confusion which rules the minds of confused beings. They're fully developed because they contain if we were to go through it, the full development of ego, or the sense of self, which is the confused mind as opposed to an enlightened mind. And the emotions consist basically of two parts. One is a story that we tell ourselves, and the other part is an energetic push-pull. So for instance, if you're in lust with someone, you tell yourself a story about how attractive they are and how good they are, and then you feel this pull. You want to pull that person into you and make them part of you. If someone has wronged you, supposingly, they insulted you, they hurt you, they did something to better themselves at your expense, and you tell yourself the story of how that you were wronged, and that story is full of hatred and anger and a desire to strike back or protect yourself or punish the other person. And these are the emotions, and they are sort of the heart of samsara. Samsara meaning confusion. Samsara is the word for the realm of unenlightenment. And the word samsara literally means circle, because it's like a snake. In fact, the symbolic image for samsara, a snake that is biting its own tail and going around and around in a circle. And that's what we do. It's kind of like, when somebody has wronged you, you can sit there and chew it and chew it and chew it over and over and over again, and you're just going around and around and around and around. And so that's the definition of samsara. You never get out of it as long as you keep trying to pursue it. Sometimes we might lie awake in bed at night worrying about something, and it goes around and around and around, and you just can't get to sleep as long as you're thinking about it. Maybe you have to get up and do something, read a book or meditate even, or do something else to get yourself out of that circle, that samsaric circle. So the idea of the Saddharma, the truth, is that which frees us from enslavement to these samsaric kleshas, these defilements, these passions. It's that which tames the mind. It cools off or pacifies the mind, because the emotions are very heated, can be, especially when they're intense. And the Dharma is very cooling. Let me get my glasses. So I've just in my notes, the fundamental meaning of the true Dharma, Saddharma, is passionlessness, peacefulness, and non-aggression. And this corresponds to really, as long as we live in a world of confusion, we're constantly in polar relationships, I and other. And these relationships can only have three modalities. When you're in a relationship to another, and we always are, to our lovers, our enemies, our friends, our acquaintances, you can either get closer together, that's desire. you can get further apart. That's what in the teachings they call hatred, because when you hate someone or hate something, you want to get rid of it. You want to distance yourself from it. And the third alternative is that you're neutral and you just stay the same difference, the same distance, because you're indifferent to it. And these are really only the only three options that you can have as long as one lives in a polar world. So the contents of the Dharma have to do with training the mind. Training the mind to step out of these circular, emotion-filled stories, energy-filled stories that entrap us and enslave us, and step out of them into the real world. The real world is the world of this present moment, stripped of those stories. It's always here. The stories take us away from this real world. They take us into the past. That son of a bitch did that thing to me and I'm going to get even. Into the future, I will get even, right? And they're very little about the present. Sometimes they're about the present. He's doing it to me right now. You know? But you're not quite in the present when you're doing that. You're sort of stepping back and looking at it through a lens. So the Dharma is always about stepping out of these stories. And it has to do with training the mind and how to do it. And that's what we just did here when we did this little meditation together for half an hour. That one is sitting and you're thinking, and then you realize that you're thinking, and at the moment that you realize you're thinking, you are free. You're free of being lost in that dream. Now, the temptation is, and the tendency is to say, oh, I was thinking. I'm a terrible meditator. I've got to try harder. And what's that? That's another thought. That's another thought about the past and the future. So don't do it. The best way to practice meditation is to be not religious, to get rid of all the oughts and the shoulds, including that one, and just see it. You can see as soon as you're aware that you're thinking, you have stepped out of the dream, you have woken up. And then you go back to the breath and the space, which is to come back to waking up. So we are practicing, you might say, we're imitating a Buddha, because we're imitating waking up. And that's what it means to be a Buddha. That's what the word Buddha means. He who awoke, or he or she who woke up. Woke up from what? From these dreams. The very dreams that we're having all the time. I mean, isn't it true that we walk through our lives just dreaming so much? You know? From the moment we wake up in the morning till the moment we wake up in the morning. Again, it's like this constant medley of dreams. It's punctuated by moments of coming back. A horn goes off. We're brushing our teeth. I think brushing your teeth is a good one. I find it tedious, yeah? To brush my teeth. So I use it as a moment of coming back. When I find that tedium and I want to go into some kind of a daydream while I brush my teeth, I say, no, I'm going to be here for my teeth brushing. I find, this is confession time, I find the same thing in the shower. That when I'm standing there in the hot water, and it feels really good, and I don't want to get out, and I can't get out, and I think I ought to get out. And I realize that the reason I can't get out is that I'm sitting there lost in some dream while the hot water, feels so good. And if I just come back to the present, then it's much easier, exponentially, to reach over and turn off the water and step out. Just by cutting the dream. So what the Dharma is always about is about coming back from dream to the real world, to this world. Now you might say that takes a lot of effort. And in this chapter, it's funny, Rinpoche talks about how people want to take a vacation, from effort. And so they go to the beach or they go to the mountains and go skiing, as a way of taking a vacation. He said the real vacation is meditation. That's when you take a vacation from the effortfulness of the samsaric mind. And you can come back and just rest, even if it's only for an instant, in this moment. That's the whole point, is to rest. It's not meant to be effortful. It's not meant to be like you're beating yourself up, whipping yourself, saying, I'm going to work harder at my meditation. Every time you meditate, it's like taking a break from one's neurotic, samsaric, effortful, so repetitive mind. We tell ourselves these stories over and over and over again. I mean, it's like we're watching the same TV show again and again. Who does that? We do it. So there are 3 divisions for working on oneself in the Dharma. They are called Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna in the Sanskrit. Shila means discipline. Samadhi means absorption. And Prajna means kind of, it can be translated in many ways, but pra is an intensifier, and jñā is the root of the word to know. So it's kind of super knowing. And it means knowing. It's sometimes it's translated as wisdom, sometimes it's translated as transcendent knowledge. It can also just be cleverness. An ordinary person who's got a lot of prajna is really, really clever. So it has different levels to the meaning of that word. Discipline is the constant return to resting one's mind in awareness. That is the discipline. There is no other discipline. All the rest of them are just crutches. But the true discipline is, once you've gotten a taste for it, to come back to the present moment, that you come back again and again. And the feeling of this kind of discipline is ironic. I mean, we think of discipline as being full of effort. But the true discipline is full of peace. The peace of just relaxing effortlessly in awareness in the present moment. It's effortless because awareness is what we are, automatically, at core. It's our fundamental nature. It's there all the time. We just depart from it into dream, into thought, into story. And then the story wears out and we're back. We never lose that fundamental awareness. We're always aware of the present moment. It's just that it gets overlaid by these stories we tell ourselves, comments of all kinds. So discipline is controlling one's mind, bringing it into a state of tranquility through shamatha practice. That's what I had reading down. Shamatha is the name of the practice that we were doing. Actually, we were doing a combination of shamatha and vipassana. This is what Trungpa Rinpoche gave his students. Shamatha is the focus of the mind on an object. And what we're doing is, you see, when we're aware of the breath going out into the space, that's the shamatha aspect of our practice. Because it's a focus, that line. Vipassana is a broad awareness of the environment. And that's the space. So we're combining the two. We're aware of the space and the breath is going out like a line. It's kind of a figure ground thing. And we're maintaining our awareness of both the figure and the ground. He says, we start by mimicking it, but it becomes real. If you do it long enough, you just keep doing it. We have the instinct. It's never imposed. We are always dealing with what we intrinsically already have. Through Shila, we are aspiring to wake up that intrinsic quality. We're shifting our allegiance from the stories to the real, to this world as it arises in the present moment. And you see, the stories are sort of entertaining. They're like TV shows. They're bad entertainment, like a bad TV show, like a reality TV show maybe, But they're kind of fascinating in how bad they are. It's like watching Trump. You can't take your eyes off him. He's so bad. It's painfully bad. And that's what these dreams are like. And then we come back to the present, and in a way it's flatter, because there isn't that drama. But it's also not repetitive. And it has a quality of freshness and awakeness to it. So meditation is the way in which we enact our discipline. And again, there are these two modes, shamatha and vipassana. If you sit and you just watch your breath, maybe with your eyes closed even, you're practicing shamatha. That's the ability to focus the mind one-pointedly on an object and not to go off into dream. And you go off into dream and you come back. And you come back and you relax your awareness on the breath. The breath kind of does it for you. You don't have to sort of bear down and hold it tightly. You just come back and there it is, doing its thing. You can do it with your eyes closed. But you can't walk down the street doing shamatha, right? You can have a serious accident. So vipassana is the practice of, instead of taking a narrow object, you take the whole world or the environment that you're in as your object of awareness. And you come back to this. It's very wide. It's very relaxed. It's effortless. You come back to this. And then the practice that we did together is combining the two, shamatha / vipassana, or focused awareness / broad awareness. We're doing them both at the same time. And that's actually closer to something you can do as you walk down the street. Vipassana awareness is something you can and should do, if you can, when you come to walk down the street. It just means, oh yeah, I was thinking, and I'm back. You walk down the street, you see some stranger who reminds you of your mother, your brother, your father, a friend, and immediately your mind goes off on a story about that stranger. And then you notice, I'm thinking, and you let it go, and you can actually see in a different way. You could see that person and the environment stripped of your story. And it might be very interesting to see it without the story, without the judgment. We're judging things so much. You walk out your front door and you're judging the quality of the day. You're looking at the sidewalk and making a judgment about that. Is there dog shit on the sidewalk? No, it's clean sidewalk. Are there flowers planted? Yes, there's some flowers. Isn't that nice? And it's nice, and it's ugly, and it's nice weather we're having. And oh, this cold is terrible. And we're just constantly lost in judgmental stories. And so the act of meditation in daily life is to wake up from them. But it's very hard to do because we are so habituated and so triggered. That's why we sit on a cushion. It's essential to actually make a discipline of sitting on the cushion. It's also essential to sit on the cushion because when you sit on the cushion, you're making the gesture of giving up the TV show. That's what makes sitting so hard. We are so caught up in our stories that we tell ourselves. We wake up in the morning and you think, uh-oh, I paid the rent. Uh-oh, did I call so-and-so? Uh-oh, I got to do this. I got to do that. Ooh, I've got this to look forward to, going to Coney Island today. And it's so hard to make a stop and do something as stupid as sitting down on a cushion and watching the environment with your breath going out into it. It's like you're giving up entertainment. And that's why sitting is so important. It's why it's so difficult and why it's the heart of our practice. Because every time you sit down on a cushion, you are making that gesture, which is a noble gesture. It's a gesture of affirming life as it arises in the present moment and giving up entertainments. He says, so you are entering into a full world, a big world, a complete world of meditation, Samadhi. That's the absorption. And what Samadhi means, the word absorption, Samadhi, means that you're getting absorbed in this world. It's like the thoughts are going away, and you're beginning to become absorbed in this, and it's full of peace, freedom. And then the last one, Prajna. And the first thing that starts to happen with Prajna is that we begin to experience a kind of sharpness, literally to the vision. The eyes are the dominant sense of the five senses, eyes, ear, nose, tongue, taste, and eye, ear, nose, tongue, and touch. And the eyes are dominant. Sometimes the ears. And so when you begin to practice and you begin to come more and more in the present, a lot of people begin to experience visual sensations becoming much sharper, colors becoming brighter. But all together, the whole world, including the world of your mental events, begins to sharpen up. That's the quality of Prajna. Prajna is a sword. The symbol is a sword, a two-edged sword. Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, he wields that sword. And it's a sword that's cutting through our daydreams, our distractions, and bringing us back to the present and making things much clearer and sharper. That's for starters. For finishers, it's the sword that brings us, ultimately, cuts through confusion completely and brings us to enlightenment. And it cuts through the two most fundamental errors that human beings make. The belief that I exist and the belief that others exist. And that's why that sword is two-edged. It cuts through both of those beliefs, the belief in I and other. And that's a subject for another day. But in doing that, it reveals the world of reality. And it sees it. That's why it's called transcendent knowledge so often, Prajna, because it cuts through mundane confusion and reveals the world of reality, which at that first level is called emptiness. Empty of what? Empty of anything having any true existence. And by that we mean, we believe that things have true existence means that they have a past and a future, that the thing that we're looking at is one thing, it's unitary, and it's independent of other things. And we look at people that way, and we regard ourselves that way. And what these teachings are saying is that the further you go down the path, the more you find that things do not have a past and a future, that the past and the future are just stories. But that nothing actually, you can never find the past or future except in story. And that everything is a constant matrix in which everything is moving, like this hand is gesturing, And we think, oh, there's a hand. But actually you could just regard it as sort of pixels moving across the computer screen, in different places, like that. And that you move into a different world. The world of shunyata is the Sanskrit word. It's a famous word. And it means emptiness. Empty of I and empty of other. And that's a great, great discovery for a practitioner on the path. That discovery is the first stage, the discovery of shunyata is the first stage of the Mahayana path. The first bhumi, the first of 10 stages. And the name of that stage, where the practitioner discovers shunyata, is great joy, pramudita, because one is become free of samsara, free of, above all, free of the self, because the self is what enslaves us. We are slaves to our notion of self and selfhood and well-being. So, Shila, the ability to rest in the present moment. Samadhi, Prajna, again, the same thing. Shila emphasizes the peace, the solidity of it, the fact that you can actually do it. And Samadhi is the quality of working with your mind in order to do that. And Prajna is what you see when you do that. Even from the very beginning, we begin to develop Prajna. Because just coming back from dream into this real world, we can cut through a lot of false beliefs about I and other. Sometimes it's necessary to really make a gesture. And you could step out of ego in one way or another. But maybe we'll discuss that another day. So that's all I have to say on these three subjects, these three disciplines, Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. And we can have a discussion. If anybody would like to comment or complain. At the end of that chapter, he goes into the whole thing. It's really wonderful. The Dharma is good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good in the end. And it's because as soon as you start, you're cutting through the veils of confusion and suffering. And it's just all good from the very get-go.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if someone, as a Buddhist teacher, would ask you, why is it human nature or our default a way of reverting to these dreams and not to be in the present, not to have prajna, when it's our authentic nature and we have to do all this discipline and coming back? And why is that? Is that a consequence of being born in this realm, the human realm? Why?
Yeah, it is a consequence of being born in the human realm, but that's circular, because to be born in the human realm is to be born in confusion. And to be born in confusion is to be reborn in a realm. It might be the human realm or one of the other 5 realms, animal realm, and then these others which you can believe in or not, as you choose, God realm, hell realm. So that doesn't do much good because it's just a circular thing. And there is no answer to that question. The only way to approach it is to ask not why does it happen, but how. Why does not tend to edification, because why is looking for someone to blame, which is more of the same thing. See, it's just, then you're still caught in the trap. But when you ask how, then it's like, just at that moment when you realize you're thinking, and you see it, and you don't do a thing with it. You just see it. You see how. That's the hardest part. Kensei Rinpoche, that guy up there on the top left, great teacher who died in around 1990 or so. No, it must have been after that. And he said that the way you treat your thoughts is, it's like you're sitting on a train and you're watching the scenery go by the window. That's the way you treat your thoughts when you're meditating. You just see them and they're gone. And you have, it's very clean, it's very sure, on your part. You just see it and you have this terrific confidence that you don't have to do a darn thing with it. I thought about saying fucking or damn. I did, didn't I? You don't have to do anything with it. You just see it. And that's so hard to do, because we want to default into another story, the story of how I'm going to become a great meditator. That's a good one. That'll take you a long time. You see, the whole point is to give up that kind of ambition. This is not an exercise in self-improvement. And if we treat it that way, like I'm going to become a better person, I'm going to become a Buddha, there's a lot of time wasted going down that rabbit hole. The whole point is to become a completely ordinary human being. Completely ordinary.
You mentioned that there are three approaches in a relationship with other people, which are attraction, hatred, and a neutral position. So our goal is to be neutral to other people, no?
No. Our goal is to be none of those. See, neutral is just indifference. Then you're sort of waiting to either like him or hate him. But you're still in that polar relationship. And you're still having a relationship. So what you want to do is cut through that altogether. Those three are called the three poisons. And they're symbolized, if you see, the Wheel of Life. You ever see the Wheel of Life? It's a heuristic, teaching device. It's this demon, he's holding the wheel. The demon is the Lord of Death. And he's holding this wheel, and the 6 realms are in the wheel, and there's a lot more. In the very center of the wheel is the coil of joy. And around that are a chicken, a pig, and a snake. And the chicken represents desire or passion, the snake represents hatred, and the pig is sloth or indifference. Those are the three poisons. And the three poisons, just as long as we're stuck believing falsely in I and other, those two poles can only do three things. They can get closer together, further apart, or maintain the same distance. And we're stuck, still in that polar relationship, which is always past and future oriented. It's never in the present.
And so to get rid of these three poisons, what is the so meditation is the way to get rid of them, or what is the
meditation and study? Because when you study these teachings like we're doing now, this is study, right? It clarifies your resolve to meditate, to practice, and to come present. When you sit on the cushion, all you're doing is doing sort of a lab, version of what you could be doing in your life. We're taking it into a laboratory setting. But the best way to do it is walking down the street. It's just that it's so much harder walking down the street because we got all these things triggering us, into stories. So we sit and we meditate. Meditation is really powerful, sitting. And the best thing, and I tell you, I've done it both ways. I've done it where I've meditated very little on a daily basis, and then gone off for retreats, where I'd do it intensely for days or weeks or even months at a time. And then I've done it on a daily basis. Daily basis beats it, hands down. If you can get yourself to sit every day, it's like water dripping on a rock. It has its effect. It really does. And not only that, but every day then you're dealing with your neurotic mind. The mind of depression, the mind of hope and fear that we live with. And every time you sit down on the cushion and that comes up and you're letting it go and coming back to the breath. If you only do it once, when you sit down, it's still, you've made that very important gesture. That willingness. So, meditation. Yeah. Okay. Brendan, and then we'll give it to you.
Thank you. The fact is, John, that not everybody sits on a cushion. Not everybody meditates. Not everybody is aware of these various ways of looking at each other. I think I still struggle with what techniques can exist off the cushion. I practice off the cushion in a variety of ways, but there are times, of course, when a klesha or an angry being or a judgmental employer or what have you who's not interested in anything that we're talking about here tonight, has a role to play. And sometimes it's very challenging to figure out how to pull from the toolbox in those situations, or how to start dismantling the ego, or how to defend oneself correctly or respectfully, or how to absorb the poison, if you will. There is a disorientation that can take place often, and I think I still struggle sometimes with trying to figure out where the work we're doing here can be better utilized in those kinds of interactions where maybe there's a bit of an imbalance or a sickness that's occurring between two people. And indifference, it actually might be a relief to be indifferent in that moment, but may not be a solution. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Huge subject, but when you find yourself moved in that way, by the external events, then the instruction is bring it to the path. That means you don't try and get rid of it. And there's two ways to get rid of it. You can either stuff it, that's one way to get rid of it, or you can cathart it. You can act it out, tell that person they're a son of a bitch, seduce that person that you're attracted to, whatever it is. And you don't try to get rid of it. You bring it to the path. You see it with awareness, and then just like you do on the cushion, you let it go and you come back to awareness of the present moment. It's very hard to do in daily life, but it's the only practice. Now, there are tricks that you can employ. So, for instance, one that I do sometimes when I've got the nerve is what I call insulting my ego. And that is when I'm feeling something really, grabbing me to do the thing I don't want to do. And it's really interesting when you can make yourself do that. What can happen? It's really, and it's so hard.
Can you give an example?
I'll give you a minor example. Just recently, I was sitting I got on a bus, and the bus was fairly crowded, but there was an empty seat. And there was a woman sitting there were two seats together, and a woman sitting in the other one, and she was big. And I sat down and I kind of squeezed myself in. And she got pissed off at me, and she said, "Stop pushing." And I said, you're taking up, more than one seat. And she said, "I am not." And we had this fight, And we're both sitting there stewing, right? And thinking, I'm right, she's wrong, And then I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a try, And I said to her, after a while, both of us sitting there, she's, like that. And I said to her, "I'm sorry I was rude." She looks at me and she said, "I was rude too." By the time we got off the bus, we didn't talk much more. We just said that, and I said, blah, 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 blah. And then we both sat there. By the time I got off the bus, I looked back. We're waving. It's so hard to do that, even just that teeny little thing, it's and much less something bigger. But it's an interesting experiment, given what the alternative is, which is to go along trapped in that story that we are telling ourselves over and over. She's that fat damn jack, which is so mean and unhappy. I mean, it almost brought me to tears when I looked back and got off the bus and she's waving, you know, and it's I think it's the quality of having a little bit of compassion for oneself when you do that kind of thing. So that's one thing you can practice, but the main thing is always, and that's just a way, you know, of giving up the story.
So even in a work situation, for example, if a supervisor has a version of things that...
Yeah, let's just cut. You've got to make a distinction. Doing that on a bus with a woman I'm never going to see again, right? That's one thing. When you've got an ongoing situation, you got to be careful because there are dangers involved, right? So yeah, if you can do it, great. But you don't want to stand in front of an oncoming train. Bodhisattvas don't do that. In other words, you don't put yourself in harm's way. Well, let me take that back. Sometimes you do put yourself in harm's way because then really interesting things can happen. But be careful with it. You know, in other words, you know what I'm saying? You just got to be careful of what the consequences can be in an ongoing situation like that, like work. And still, you might be able to do that. You might be able to insult your ego in a way that opens things up. Because it gives the other person room. When you stop, as long as we're pushing at them, they're going to push back, you know?
My question was very similar to the one that he just asked you, and you kind of answered it in a way. But it also goes back to the point of indifference. Instead of indifference, I suppose it would be about being present and open.
Would be what?
Present and open to a situation. But and totally leaving your ego out of it, which is very difficult and
very what?
Very difficult in this realm that we live in this outside world we live in. So my initial word that I was going to, aside of indifference, would be forgiveness. But that sounds that's a bit righteous and lofty. So compassion. You answered my question by answering his question. Thank you. Compassion is the word.
Compassion. Yeah, we haven't talked about that tonight, but it's woven in everything that we've been discussing. Because compassion, you see, when you come back into the present moment, compassion is not a feeling sorry for. Compassion is the full ability to let things be what they are, what they truly are.
Even if they hurt.
Even if they hurt. Absolutely.
And even if somebody is hurting you.
Hurting you.
Yes.
Yes, but I mean, you know, again, if they're damaging you, you don't want to allow that to happen, you know, like.
And what do you do in that situation if they're doing some sort of damage to you, whether it's emotional or whatever?
Well, if it's emotional, that's another story. But if they're cutting off your leg, you know, then you stop.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know.
What's the story if it's an emotional?
You have to exercise your common sense, that's all. Yeah. It's just a matter of what Trungpa Rinpoche used to call transcendental common sense. You know,
transcendental common sense.
Yeah, common sense. Just being commonsensical about it. Being able to distinguish between my egotism and what is right. You know, what needs to happen in this situation. Yeah, I don't need to be, you know, feel that I'm really important or right or any of that stuff, but I do need to, you know, make a living and have friends.
It's those three letters, E-G-O. It always comes back to those three letters, E-G-O.
E-G-O, yeah. Ego, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great.
I found in most cases when you boil down to the most raw emotion, which is the fears, and when facing difficult situation like that, I found myself, if I can stare at my own fears in the most raw form, and that helped me a lot, because whatever you dealing with the world, you have a big lack and fears behind all the things that manifested and masqueraded, come out in different way. But it all boils down to the fears factor.
Fears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You fear of losing your job, you fear of losing the other person, you fear of this and that. And that's where the most essential part of you that you have to face.
There's a teaching that he gave us that is ironically so difficult. But he used to say to us, cheer up. And then he'd say, please cheer up. I mean, sometimes it's so hard to cheer up. We're so down with fear, with our depression. And yet, in order to be awake, to be truly awake, you got to be cheerful. It is cheerful. Buddhas are cheerful. Cheerful and ordinary.
But I think as human beings, we are wired to protect ourselves, and I think this is really into our DNA, whatever that's been, that's been wired in for tens of thousands of years, that we evolved from, a chimpanzee type of creature until now we're standing on two legs. Everything that has been evolved, all the emotions also been evolved, and they become more subtle, and become more and more. There are more names to it, But I think the more primal. But if we can tap more into our more primal feelings, that would really help. More archetype of the feelings, And that's why it's hard to cheer up, because when you are facing the survival instinct, that we are wired to go out and fight, but that way is not working, because when you go out to fight with other always all gear up to fight you, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why it's hard to cheer up, because cheer up is completely put yourself in another mode. These people don't understand that. Then they can't fight you. They only know that somebody going to come to fight me, I'm going to fight back, right? But if you cheer up, they will be looking at like you completely scrap their mode of action.
Complete what?
The mode of action. That's wired to fight with each other for survival reason. Yeah.
Something I've been, wrestling with is the motivation for meditation. This to fix something, and I got blinded to the fact that, I'm trying to fix something, and then I'm like, okay, then it could oscillate the other way of just not doing it. But then you start to see the effects, and there's a maintenance component, I guess, more a practical, functional purpose towards it. But then you could, you get like stuck, going back, fixing, not fixing. So how does one come to a sane approach to motivation for meditation? I guess is a good question.
You just do it. That's it. And I'm not trying to bypass the question. The best way to do meditation is just do it. You set yourself a discipline. You're going to do it every day. And when the time comes, you sit down and you do it. And whatever thoughts you're having about it, You know, like, oh, I'm a good meditator, oh, I'm a bad meditator, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. You know, I didn't do it yesterday, but I'm not so. It doesn't matter. Just do it. Because it works. It works. It has its effect. And you just do it. You sit down and you just come back to the breath, going out into the space. You know, that's a terrific meditation. To come back, you see the space. The space is that's what's so important. The space that we live in. This is the space of reality. It's full of colors and sounds and sensations and thoughts that arise and all this stuff, this panoply of extraordinary phenomena. And it's all coming in and out and moving through space, disappearing and appearing continually. This is the space of reality. When you get to the highest teachings, it's all about space. And we can do it from the beginning. We can come back and rest in it. You come back and here you are. You know? And then your mind gets busy again and you think, and then you realize, I'm thinking, and then here you are. You just touch in. If you only touch in once in a meditation session, it's still good. Because it's good not only because you touched in, but because you made the gesture. And you're switching your allegiance from those crappy TV shows that we watch up here to what's real. And that gesture of that willingness to switch allegiance is everything. That's the way in which you tread the path. Without that, we're just consigning ourselves to sleepwalking. Okay.
No, go ahead. I just had the thought that what you described before, you know, the pushing and the kleshas, you know, if you just thought about all the energy that goes into that and how relieving it is, the energy of being present, you know, it's kind of like, it's so much lighter, the quality, you know,
it is, isn't it?
You know, and then there's space for joy because it's lighter, but so what we're basically doing all the time, we're wasting so much energy, you know, if you just think about it as amp, you know, whatever it is, how you measure it, there's, you know, so much energy to be lost. And then in the present space, there's so much energy to be gained.
Those stories are so repetitive, again and again, and they're so harmful, and they're so painful, you know. Oh, that person did this and so to me, and as a result, my future is blighted, and I'm never going to have what I had before, and, you know, all kinds of stories that are really terrible. And they're like tragedies, you know, and we keep repeating them to ourselves. Meanwhile, the world is full of opportunity, and that's we didn't get to it really, but one of the other principles of the path is going into action, and the action is to be of service, to be of benefit to other sentient beings. And when you do that, one begins to open one's heart and experience love, you know, more love. A greater kind of love. And that's very much a part of this path. And then you begin to get tremendous support from your life, because the life begins to become warmer and more full of love and pleasure. And it can begin to overcome these terrible stories that we often tell ourselves. Those stories are so bad, I mean, they could kill you. And they do kill people. Sorry, what's your name?
My name is Joe. Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but it struck me that it was the kind of simplifying the teachings by saying, cheer up. The teachings are there is no joy without suffering, and there is no suffering without joy, and suffering is a reality also. So I'm a little confused with just cheering up. I mean, I can find happiness in servitude even when I'm sad. Is that cheering up?
You can find happiness in what?
In servitude.
In serving?
Yes.
Yeah,
even when I'm suffering or feeling sad, I can find happiness in that. Is that a form of cheering up?
Maybe.
It's not easy to just cheer up.
It's not easy, is it? It's really hard. What makes it hard?
And it's not a reality either.
And what makes it hard to cheer up?
Well, like I said, I mean, from my readings and what I've been studying and learning is suffering is just as much a part of life as joy, and one does not exist without the other. Maybe I'm overthinking. I don't know.
Okay, well, let's put it. I'm not. Yeah, Brendan, do you want to address that?
I don't know if I have an answer to what Joe's pondering, but I know what's your name? When you were speaking and you were talking about this kind of primal fear that I think we all can relate to, the anxiety, I think the storylines all originate from deep within those fears and anxieties. I was trying to think, geez, what is the anecdote there? But then part of the beauty of this path is that we also all have access to Buddha nature inside of us. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking like, one of the reasons I've been drawn to the path, stayed on the path, is to recognize that. And in a way it becomes a tool, a very powerful part of starting to work with that fear and work with the anxieties. Mm-hmm. If I forget about the Buddha nature, then I start to really, really fold in on the terror and the fears and the storylines and the what-ifs. But if I remember that there's also that space of grace, of generosity, of compassion for myself, for others, that starts to give me a little bit of wiggle room, to not feel so tight with the fear. So it's one of the things that keeps me hooked. I think it's so beautiful. It's just the knowledge that is inside of us as well, alongside the fear.
I think what hooks one in the end, or maybe at some point in the beginning, in the middle, is the discovery that you can give up the fear, and you can give up the sorrow and the depression. And then when you do that, you can come back into the present moment of working and being with people and being of help, and that there's tremendous joy, cheerfulness in that. And when you discover that, then you begin to realize you've got a choice. And the choice is to sit and chew over those same stories again and again and again, or to come present, to get involved, to take a step into the present moment. And in doing that, you do that through meditation practice. You might do that through being of service to someone or some people. And then when you do that, you can cheer up. And the whole thing of suffering, suffering, we can build this long case for it being a quality of the species that's developed over thousands of years, primal instinct and, survival of the fittest and blah, blah, blah. But the fact is that we experience it moment to moment. And in those moments, we can deal with it. We can see it. We can either go further into the suffering, or we can say, thinking, and come back into the present moment and engage with the present. We have that choice all the time. Well, Fred, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add on in the joy-suffering polarity. And it, what I've kind of discovered is, the suffering is there to teach. It's like it's to lead you towards joy. For example, if you're suffering, you could be like, something I come to, and like an awareness I come to is like, it means I'm alive, and if I'm alive, I could work through this. I could burn off this suffering in some way through some, you found joy in servitude, and over time, an awareness. Even though it doesn't feel like it, that's the tough part about suffering. It doesn't feel like it's going to go away. It's like, oh, it's anchored in my gut and it's burning. but it does.
Yeah, our suffering is so idiosyncratic and personal, each to each one of us. And if you compare yourself to others, you might be a lot better off than someone else. It's here, the suffering. It's here in not wanting things to be the way they are and wanting them to be different. I think of it's all about the need to improve oneself in one way or another. And I think of Carlos Castaneda in his book, one of his books about Don Juan, the Yaqui Brujo, sorcerer, in Mexico. This Carlos Castaneda was a Western LA intellectual who went down to Mexico and sort of by sheer chance met this Indian sorcerer named Don Juan and became his student, learning the Yaqui Indian way of knowledge. And he wrote these books about it. They're a lot of fun. And who knows whether it really happened or not, but they were great. And actually, Castaneda came back to the U.S. and had students. But he describes in one of his books, he was with Don Juan, who was this magician, sorcerer, could do phenomenal things, strange things. And Don Juan had a buddy named Don Gennaro, another sorcerer, another brujo. And Castaneda describes one time he was with the two of them, and they were talking to each other and sort of behind his back. And he overheard them talking about and laughing about him, how he was such an intellectual, he was always asking questions. So he interrupts them and he says, "Look, should I stop asking questions?" And Don Juan says to him, "Oh no, don't do that. Then you'd be trying to improve yourself. It's the worst vice people have. Trying to improve yourself. It's the basis of our suffering. We're always trying to make things better or avoid things getting worse or bemoaning the fact that they have gotten worse, wanting to make them better. And it has nothing to do with working with the real world. And that's what this path is all about. Coming back again and again to this world, shifting our allegiance. Well, we should end. I'm going to make one announcement. We are having, our sister organization is the Westchester Buddhist Center up in Westchester, in Irvington. And every year we have a retreat, a 1-week meditation retreat. And it's described on the Westchester Buddhist Center website. This is a retreat that's held, the first part of it, the week is held in silence. And then we open it up for some limited talking in the last half of the week. And we sit from roughly 7 in the morning until 8:30 at night with alternate periods of sitting and walking meditation. This is not torture or inhumane. And there are talks and readings, and there's yoga every day for those who wish to have yoga. And the food's good. It's held at Garrison Institute. And if you're interested, check it out on the website. It's we've been doing this for 8 or 9 years now. It's February 16th through 23rd. Right. Okay.